Just a little bit funny and odd on the end there. Not terrible, but yeah, something not quite right about that. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having an awesome day. It is Friday, November 15th here in South Georgia, and today I've got a fun little video planned for y'all. We're gonna see what's the best tasting greens in our fall garden. We think we know, but do we really know? So most people are familiar with mustard greens, and we're actually gonna harvest these Savannah mustard greens here in a minute. Most people are familiar with turnip greens, which I don't grow, but a lot of people do grow. And most people are familiar with eating collard greens and kale. But supposedly, you can also eat broccoli greens, cauliflower leaves, and even Brussels sprout leaves. So today we're going to compare those familiar greens with the ones that people probably aren't as familiar with eating and see which ones are the best. Now before we start trying some of these, we should probably talk about what makes greens taste the way they do. And the flavor is mostly due to some compounds called glucosinolates. Now if you've been following the channel a while, you've heard us use that term glucosinolates before when talking about using some of these brassicas, particularly mustard greens, for soil biofumigation. So when you incorporate those greens into the soil, those glucosinolates are released and they can provide some natural biofumigation for your soil to ward off some of those nasty soil-borne pests. But anyways, those glucosinolates inside the leaves of these greens are what gives them their kind of spicy flavor sometimes, or even the little bit of bitter flavor sometimes. So different greens will have different levels of glucosinolates, and that's what makes them taste different. Now here in a minute, I'm going to see which ones taste more spicy or bitter to me, but according to the Google, just a basic ranking of glucosinolate concentrations among some of these greens we're going to be tasting today. They put mustard greens at the top of the list. Right under that would be Brussels sprouts and broccoli, kale, cauliflower, and collards supposedly have the lowest glucosinolate concentration amongst those main ones we mentioned. So let's start doing a little gathering for our taste test. I'm going to go ahead and harvest this bed of Savannah mustard greens. Probably could have harvested these a week ago, but this cool weather now has got me really craving some greens. So we'll harvest that entire bed. I could probably also harvest this bed here. Not near as tall yet, but I'm going to let those leaves get a little bit bigger, closer to this size here. So I'm just going to go through here and do a clean cut on these, harvest this entire round raised bed and bag them up as I go. Hopefully I get 2 or 3 bags, enough for a good mess of mustard greens. And so we'll just cut these a few inches above the soil level there. We don't need to cut them super close because we do want them to grow back. So we just grab a handful at a time, cut, and then start stuffing them in our bags. Alright, so we got us about 3.5 nice bags of mustard greens there, and by the time we enjoy those and then harvest and enjoy those right there, these that we just cut will have grown back and we'll be ready to harvest again. And I sure do like it when a plan comes together like that. And as a side note, when you harvest a full bed of greens like this, it's the perfect time to fertilize these for a nice second round of production. Now that the soil's opened up there, you could sprinkle some granular fertilizer in there. I'll probably hit mine with some of that AgriThrive general purpose, just mix it up in a bucket and pour it over that bed. But anyways, let's get back to the point of this video, which is trying and ranking all these different greens. We'll start out with these Savannah mustard greens that I just harvested. I've eaten these many times over the years, but we'll try these again just to kind of give us a baseline for comparison. So here we go. So much like any other mustard green, you get that little bit of spiciness there. Really good though, man. You could just eat those raw. Really don't even have to cook those. Those would be perfect in a salad, but that's what you expect a mustard green to taste like. Now let's keep plugging along with some of the more traditional greens. We've got 2 varieties of collard greens here. We've got the flash variety, a hybrid kind of standard green collard, and then we've got this one here, the old-timey blue collard. can't really tell, but on a lot of those plants you'll see those purple or bluish veins. They tend to be a little more pronounced once we start getting some cold weather. So hybrid collard versus heirloom collard. So we try the flash here. Not near as much spice as you're getting with the mustard green. Get a little bit of it. Collard greens tend to be a little more on the bitter side of things compared to some of the other greens out there. And you definitely get that the more you kind of chew it up a little bit. And then we'll try the old-timey blue collard. Definitely less spice, less bitterness on that one there. A good bit sweeter than the flash collard is. And I've noticed that when trying these two varieties in the past. The old-timey blue, sweeter leaves on those, not as bitter. I get better plant performance long term out of the flash. That's why I still grow both. But you could eat those old-timey collards raw there. They're pretty good. Then we've got our kale here, which are also pretty familiar to most people. We've got the darker bore curly kale, and then we've got the black magic dinosaur or lacinato kale. And with the kale, you get a little bit of bitterness, but not really any spice like you do on the mustard or even the collard. And those taste pretty similar. I would say the curly kale maybe is a little bit sweeter than the dinosaur kale, but probably not a whole lot of glucosinolates in these right here because you're just not getting a lot of that spice. Now getting into some unfamiliar territory, we've got a small broccoli leaf and a small cauliflower leaf here. I want to say I've had broccoli leaves before. I don't know that I've ever eaten a cauliflower leaf. Let's see what the broccoli leaf tastes like. Not a whole lot at the beginning, but a little bit at the end there. Tastes a lot like kale to me. Way more similar to kale than probably collards. Not a lot of spice in the broccoli leaf there at all. Maybe a little bit at the end, but not much. Now on to the cauliflower here. Get a little more bite with those. I would say the cauliflower leaves a little closer to collards than the broccoli leaves would be. Still good though. I mean, both of these could pass for any type of green, I think, really. Nothing wrong with either of those. So I just went and grabbed a Brussels sprout leaf, and as I did that, that cauliflower leaf there just started tasting just a little bit funny and odd on the end there. Not terrible, but yeah, something not quite right about that. So let's dig into the Brussels sprout leaf, which I've never eaten, but I've heard of a lot of people eating these. Nice crunch to those, and that bitterness jumps out at you pretty quick. Reminds me a lot of a collard green there. It's almost more bitter than the collard greens I have growing. Probably have to put a little bit of sugar and vinegar, a good bit of bacon grease when you cook those, but they could pass for some decent greens. So after trying all those, I can firmly say I know why these familiar greens, the mustard, the kale, and the collards are familiar, and these other ones are not as familiar. So the ones we traditionally eat are definitely better. I wouldn't say miles better, but they're definitely better than these other ones here, the broccoli, the cauliflower, and the Brussels sprouts. Now, you put the broccoli and the cauliflower and the Brussels sprout greens in a pot, put enough, pork meat in there, bacon grease in there, season them up right, you might not be able to tell the difference, and you might be able to hide some of that bitterness or some of those odd flavors. So I definitely wouldn't grow broccoli, Brussels sprouts, or cauliflower just for their greens. Now, if you want to be resourceful and use the whole plant, yes, you can definitely eat those greens there, but I don't think they're as good as the collard greens and the kale and the mustard greens. So if you've got room, grow the things we traditionally eat as greens. If you're really wanting to just be resourceful, then yeah, eat the whole broccoli plant, eat the whole Brussels sprout plant, eat the whole cauliflower plant. And if you want to be resourceful, let's kind of rank these three unfamiliar greens. So I would probably put broccoli at the top. It was the best of the three. Then Brussels sprouts behind that, and then cauliflower probably at the bottom of the list. Wasn't awful, but just didn't taste good the longer it sat on my taste buds. And if we were to rank these familiar greens, which is kind of hard to do because I really like them all, but if I had to rank them, I would put the Savannah mustard at the top of the list. That's the best tasting green out here in my opinion. Probably put the old-timey blue collard right behind that, then the flash collard, then the curly darker board kale, then the dinosaur kale. But that doesn't mean I don't like this kale. I really love this stuff. Brooklyn does a kind of creamy pasta dish with some noodles and this kale and sausage, and it is absolutely delicious. So they're all good, but if I had to rank them, that's the way I do it. I'd put Savannah mustard at the top, and then the kale would be at the bottom. So that's my humble opinion, but I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments below, especially if you've ever tried some of these lesser known greens like the broccoli, the Brussels sprouts, and the cauliflower. Which ones do you prefer? Which ones do you favor or maybe plant more of in your garden? And I think everyone's opinion, not just mine, is extremely valuable here, especially for beginner gardeners. You know, if you just got 2 raised beds to work with, you can't grow a separate row of broccoli, collards, kale, mustard, Brussels sprouts, all these different brassicas. You kind of got to pick and choose what you want. And so growing things like broccoli and Brussels sprouts may be more valuable to you with limited space, because like with broccoli, you're going to get the head and then use those greens as well. Same thing with Brussels sprouts, you get the sprouts. You can also use the green, utilize the entire plant. I've always said collards are the most productive cool season veggie you can grow, because you can harvest them so many times. But maybe if you think you're going to get tired of collard greens, you go for something like broccoli. Maybe the greens aren't quite as good as collards, but you're getting the heads of broccoli in addition, so that may make it worth it. So I hope you enjoyed the video today, and as always, you can find seeds for all those varieties we harvested and tasted today on our website at lazydogfarm.com. And if you want to see how we planted a lot of those cool season veggies and hear about some of our strategies to maximize their productivity, you can watch this video right here when we planted those collards, the broccoli, the cauliflower, and even some cabbage. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.